Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. And I know it's quite an early morning for a keynote when most of us are deciding whether to have the second cup of coffee or not. But today is a very special day for me. It's my birthday. So birthdays usually mean two things, cake and reflection. Unfortunately, there is no cake here today. So all you're going to get is the reflection part. And I'm sure it is going to be worth your while. This morning I was reflecting on my journey and realized that time flies so fast. 5 years ago, I was forced to move out of my home and my country. Not because I was scared of the regime, but because leaving was the only option to continue my fight against hate and for truth and justice. And 5 years later, standing before you here all today, I can say with pride that I continue to fight every single day to make sure that hate has no home anywhere. I was born and raised in Indian-administered Kashmir. It's a place of breathtaking beauty, but also one scarred by decades of conflict and violence. A part of Kashmir is under the Indian control, a part under Pakistani control, and another part under the Chinese control. And these lines on the maps, they are not abstract lines for us Kashmiris. They're the lines that cut through our lives, separating our families, and making our region a contested space where our dreams and aspirations are always crushed. So living there and growing up there meant living in this constant presence of loss. And as a people, we have collectively suffered. Our entire Kashmiri population carries a trauma that lingers across generations. And living in that space meant coming up with things that you can use to cope up with such a presence of loss. And for me, naturally, it was writing. And when I entered college, it was less like I chose journalism and more like journalism chose me. So I started my journalism career in 2014. It was the very same year when Narendra Modi became Prime Minister of India, and his use of authoritarian tactics and the Hindu rights onslaught on religious minorities became much of the focus of my reporting. And to take a step back here, for those of you who don't know, Modi's policies are centered on Hindu nationalism, or Hindutva. It's a majoritarian political ideology that asserts that India only belongs to Hindus, the majority Hindus. And as a result, the country's 230 million minorities that include Christians and Muslims are othered as outsiders or infiltrators and subjected to pervasive violence and hate. And within a year of Modi taking office, it was very apparent that the country was headed in a very different direction than what he had promised during the campaign trail, that was inclusive growth for all. There was rise in hate crimes, hate speeches, violence, riots, conversations around discriminatory laws, and correlated lynchings. By the way, in India, you can be lynched over suspicion of just consuming beef. And an unprecedented crackdown on civil society and press. I wrote about these realities, and as a result of that, I was threatened, I was harassed, I was censored. It became an environment where the act of telling truth itself became an act of defiance. And it taught me a lesson that democracies can be very fragile, can be rendered hollow if hate and majoritarianism and authoritarianism take root. And eventually I was forced to move out and live in exile. And I can tell you, exile is the most painful and excruciating thing that anyone has to ever go through. As Palestinian scholar Edward Said rightly points out, that it is a state of terminal loss. But exile doesn't mean silence. It can sometimes mean a new beginning. Today I lead Center for the Study of Organized Hate. It's an organization based in Washington, D.C. We do research, policy, and advocacy to counter far-right extremism, hate, radicalism, violence, and online harms across the world. Look at the irony that this regime in India tried to silence my work in India, but instead ended up making it global. That's the power of journalism. That's the power of telling the truth and being on the right side of the history. In 2021, I founded Hindutva Watch, which is right now India's only operational hate tracker, and a research group called India Hate Lab that studies hate speech in online and offline realms targeting religious minorities. And together, both of these projects, databases, have tracked and archived thousands and thousands of hate crimes, hate speeches, and incidents of violence, the visual evidence. And over the last 2 years at India Hate Lab, we have published comprehensive reports on hate speeches in the country, targeting minority violence, inciting hate speeches. In 2023, we documented 668 anti-minority hate speeches, events, and rallies. And in 2024, this number jumped up to 1,165. That is a 74% rise. And most of these egregious violence inciting speeches were delivered by Prime Minister himself and many of his colleagues. And 85% of these speeches were either first shared or live streamed on social media platforms. And these are not fringe gatherings or rallies or events. These are attended by tens of thousands of people, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of people, and watched by millions others online. And the scary part is that most of these speeches incited violence, with some even calling for ethnic cleansing and genocide of religious minorities. And we must remember that all the incidents of mass violence or genocide throughout the history started with the words, with hate speech. Look at Rwandan genocide, look at the Holocaust, look at the Rwandan genocide in Bosnia, in Burma, Rohingya. And today, India is drowning in these words of hate. And nothing of this would be possible without the social media platforms, the technology. Their algorithms or recommender systems reward outrage, and their business models monetize hate. And they have completely failed when it comes to implementing their own policies around harmful content, because for them, the priority is profit, not the user safety. So that's the unfortunate reality we are working within. And the Early Warning Project of the US Holocaust Memorial Museum has ranked India among the top 10 countries most at risk of new mass killings. And a single trigger incident has a potential to engulf an entire country, which, by the way, hosts 1/6 of the world's population, into complete chaos. But those of us who have been raising alarm about these developments in the country have been systematically targeted and silenced. My organization has been filed with a police case in India that carries a prison sentence of up to 5 years if I were to go home. And over the last many years, the Indian government has repeatedly sent dozens of notices, over 30 over the last 4 years, as far as I can remember, to take down our content, to take down our work on Twitter, which makes our account one of the heavily censored accounts in India today. And last year, they're pretty successful. The government issued an emergency order and banned both our websites in India and our X handle. So people in India cannot access this critical data, which, by the way, Freedom House called was crucial in shaping how people would vote in the last general election. So right before the elections, they just banned our websites in India. So I have moved court. I'm fighting it out in the court against the government and against Elon Musk, by the way, who calls himself the champion of free speech. And here you can see him towing the authoritarian line. So, and I think the unfortunate reality today is that those who speak out against hate and fight authoritarianism are at a great risk of state action than those who propagate hate and commit acts of violence. But one thing that this exile has taught me is that silence and neutrality, these are two deadly words, only embolden regimes to unleash reign of terror on people. So never adopt silence, never adopt neutrality. Be on the right side always. And all of you here right now must be kind of wondering what it has to do with you as students sitting so far away from South Asia, right? We live in an era where these ethnically and geographically diverse far-right movements are deeply embedded within this global network of far-right movements. They mirror the very same ideologies. They share tactics, techniques, procedures. They have the very common goals and strategies. And Hindu nationalism, by the way, is very much part of this global network of far-right movements. And I must say and argue that Hindu nationalism is not just India's problem. It is very much part of this global shared struggle against all forms of hate, fascism, and authoritarianism. Yeah, it is. Like, believe it or not, it is. You cannot defeat one while allowing other to flourish in silence. And I must also, argue that without defeating Hindu nationalism, you cannot defeat all these different ethno-nationalist far-right ideologies that are sweeping right now across the globe, from US to Europe to South Asia. Look at any part of the world, Latin America, you have this rising surge of far-right authoritarianism everywhere, who share this very same common ideas and ideologies and tactics. So we need to be unified and fight it out together. And I want to also point out about these social media platforms. When you think about Facebook, X, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, and all these platforms, they're not platforms for just fun and connection. They are battlefields where algorithms reward outrage, as I mentioned earlier, and push these various harms, different kind of harms, including misinformation, disinformation, and as a result, what we see is this deepening of polarization and division within our societies. And as we can see here in this country, with the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk and the rising political violence in the country, social media is playing a very critical role in that. So we have to repeatedly think about and make an effort to understand how social media platforms, these digital technologies, play into this entire scheme of things. And you all here in this room, I think you are the next generation of researchers, policymakers, leaders, attorneys, maybe a few human rights defenders. And it's so important that we all work together in shaping a world where we care about what kind of digital world and informational ecosystem you all are inheriting and passing over to generations after you. That is so important because right now the integrity of our information system is at stake. It's deeply toxic, it's deeply polarized. So that is so important that we repeatedly think about securing our information ecosystem. And it wouldn't be possible without all of us working together to do this work. Because if it was to happen in silos, then I don't think we are going to achieve anything. And it is also a fact that all these harms that we see perpetuated by authoritarians in one country can always travel across and move to other countries because authoritarian regimes and authoritarian leaders in these far-right groups learn from each other. And they're so waiting for that moment to capture power and implement their plans and their vision for what a country should look like and who should belong and who shouldn't. And at the end, I would like to point out that if hate and authoritarianism is allowed to flourish in India, which, by the way, calls itself the world's largest democracy, then no democracy is safe, including one of the oldest democracies in the world, the United States. Thank you so much.